All right, welcome back everybody. This is a video for my 100B students looking at our applying consumer choice activity. So we're going to do a couple of things today. We're going to go through and look at utility curves and constrained optimization with a change in prices and look at a CPI adjustment and how that affects consumer utility. We'll look at a change in a consumer and derive an angle curve. So let's get started. The first problem says that there is a consumer who has two goods in their consumption bundle. They consume bread and coffee. And so this consumer sees the current price of bread is $2 and the current price of coffee is $2. So let's get that up here and get started. So they consume bread and coffee. The price of bread is $2. The price of coffee is $2. And this is in the book with slightly different context. It's in the book as problem 4.2. So if you want, you can reference it there, and it kind of talks about different stuff. But we also have the consumption. So the quantity demanded of bread is 10 loaves, and the quantity demanded of coffee is 5 cups of coffee. And we want to do a couple of different things here. We're going to graph the budget line and consumption point for this consumer, given an income of $30. Then we're going to go ahead and change prices. We're going to use the price change to calculate the CPI for this consumer. And then we're going to look at how we can compensate the consumer for the change in prices, how we would supplement their income, a cost of living adjustment, and see what that does to our consumer. So the first thing we want to remember is that our income is going to be equal to the cost of our basket, which is going to be the cost of that bundle of goods is going to be equal to the price of bread, which is $2, times the quantity demanded of bread, plus the price of coffee, times the quantity demanded of coffee. So what we're really looking at is that we have a basket, the cost of a basket in the first period, which is $2 times 10 plus $2 times 5, which gives us 20 and 10, or a $30 basket, which makes sense because that's what our income is. And of course, our consumer would want to consume every last drop of dollars to buy bread and coffee. So the basket in our current period costs $30. We can graph that relationship. So we want to go ahead and graph the budget constraint and indifference curve for our consumer. They're going to consume coffee and bread. And we're going to see that they could spend $30 on coffee and buy 15 cups of coffee, or $30 of bread and buy 15 loaves of bread. And just to remind you guys, when we're looking at these, the simple way to calculate these budget lines is to remember that the endpoints are always y divided by the price of the good, right? Y divided by the price of the good. And that's how you start with those budget lines. It's very similar to a PPF, if you remember PPFs from 1B. And so that can help you graph it. So now we want to put our budget line in. And then add in our consumer's optimal bundle, which is going to be 5 cups of coffee and 10 loaves of bread. And I'm going to label that E1, and I'm even going to throw an indifference curve in there, because I always want an indifference curve. Cool. So that's part A. Graph the budget line and consumption point for the consumer, E1. Suppose the price of bread increases by 20% and the price of coffee increases by 10%. So now what we're going to have is the change in price of coffee is 10%, and the change in the price of bread is 20%. So we're going to have a new budget line based on these new prices. So we need to figure out what the new price of bread and the new price of coffee is. The easiest way to do that is just multiply that price by 1.1 for coffee and 1.2 for bread. So if I multiply $2 for the price of coffee times 1.2 to get that 20% change, I'm going to get that the price of coffee is now in period 2. In period 2 is $2.20. Try and make that look not terrible. I'm going to start over because it does look terrible. So the price of coffee in period 2 is $2 times 2.1 or $2.20. The price of bread in period 2 is $2 times 1.2 or $2.40. Okay. And this is the way that the book does most of the sort of writing of this, the labeling. They actually would have done this as B1 and C1. But then we can go through and calculate the cost of the basket now for our new basket of goods with the new prices. So we'd want to know what the price of the basket of goods is in period 2 using the prices in period 2 and the quantities that are in period 1 that are held constant. So we're assuming that our consumer still wants to consume the same quantity of goods. They want to. So we want to see what the cost of that basket would be. And this is that section where we were talking about CPI and cost of living increases. So now we've got bread costs $2.40 times quantity of 10, and coffee costs $2.20 times a quantity of 5. 10 times 2.4 gives us $24. And 5 times 2.5 or 2.2 gives us $11, which gives us a total cost of the basket of $35. So far, so good? So what we also want to do here is draw in the new budget constraint given these new prices. And remember, if we've got our income of $30, we can do that by just taking y divided by the prices of the two goods. And that's going to show us how the price change alters our consumer's budget constraint and give us something to compare to when we give them that cost of living adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and do 30 divided by 2.2 equals 13.6 loaves or cups of coffee. That's going to be about right here, we'll say. And 30 divided by 2.4 gives us 12.5 loaves of bread, closer to here. Give or take, not perfect. So what we're seeing is because both prices changed, our consumer is made worse off. The slope does change slightly because the price of coffee didn't go up as much as the price of bread. But not a huge difference in the slope because the ratio of 2 to 2 is not that different from the ratio of 2.4 to 2.2. But what we do see is that because both prices went up, our consumer is made worse off by that new change in prices, right? So inflation happens, prices go up, consumers are harmed. So now we have graphed the consumer's new budget constraint given the change in prices. We've calculated the price of the basket of goods in period 2. And I'm going to go ahead and stick this up here. So we have the basket in period 1 was worth $30. And in period 2, it was $35. Woo. So if we want to give our consumer a cost of living adjustment, we need to know what the inflation rate was. So we need to calculate the CPI. And so you want to remember the CPI is the new price is the price of the most recent basket divided by the price of the base year. Or in this case, what we're going to do is just divide these prices by each other. So if I want the CPI for period 2, I'm going to divide the cost of the basket in period 2 divided by the cost of the basket in period 1, multiply by 100. I'm going to get 1.1666 repeating, so I'm going to call that a CPI of 116.67. The great thing about this is now we have an index, right? We have an index with a base year of 1 and the current period is in 2. That's showing us the change in prices. It's also showing us the inflation rate. So if I wanted to know how much I'd have to raise income to compensate this consumer for the change in prices, I'm going to have to increase income by 16.67%, right? So if we graph the change in income to compensate our consumer for higher prices, we're going to see an interesting effect. So let's do that. So if we increase their income by 16.67%, we're going to take $30 and multiply it by 1.1667, and that's going to give us a new income of $35, give or take. So now the compensated income in period 2 is going to be approximately $35. That doesn't mean we go out to that same initial level, because remember, we want to expect, what we expect is this, this cost of living adjustment is going to tend to overcompensate consumers because they're going to tend to adjust their consumption based on the relative changes in prices. So if our consumer views coffee and bread as generally normal goods that are weak substitutes, we're going to see consumption change. And as the price of bread goes up faster than the price of coffee, our consumer is going to buy less bread and buy more coffee. And so what we end up seeing is these cost of living adjustments, even though they're tied to the change in prices, are going to tend to put our consumer on a higher indifference curve because of the change in relative prices. Let me show you what I mean. So now we have our new income. And remember, we want to find the new endpoints by taking our new income and our new relative prices and see where that puts us. Okay? Now, this example isn't perfect because in this case, the prices have changed by a really small amount, income changed by a lot, but you kind of get the sense of it. So what we'll do is we'll take that new income of $35 and divide it by the price of coffee, 2.2, to get our new endpoint. And it's going to be 15.9. I'm going to say 16. So we're going to actually end up with the new budget constraint out here at, let's say, 16. And then we want to take that same $35 and divide it by 2.4. And we get pretty close to 15 there. It's 14.58. I'm going to say that's about 15. And so the cost of living adjustment budget constraint is actually higher than the original. Let's say if we say it's 15.5, I'll just put it right here. Oops. Let's try and draw this in a really classy way. Here, let's do this. A slightly higher budget constraint. We can already see that our consumer is going to be on a higher indifference curve, so they're going to actually get more utility as a result of that cost of living adjustment. In this case, that's a small change because it's a small change in prices, but you kind of get the intuition now about how cost of living adjustments can overcompensate consumers, right? Because now we'll definitely have to get a new consumption point on a higher indifference curve. Cool? That's question 1. It's kind of a long one, but I think it was good. Okay. Part 2 says to look at Hugo, who views coffee and donuts as perfect complements. He always eats one donut with one cup of coffee and will not eat a donut without coffee or drink coffee without a donut. Perfect complements. Got it? Cool. So we have the price of donuts is $4 and the price of coffee is $4. And we want to derive and plot Hugo's angle curve for donuts given 3 income levels. So let's look at coffee and donuts. We'll start up here with Hugo's demand for donuts and coffee. And we have the price of donuts is $4 and the price of coffee is also $4. And then we have 3 income levels. So our first income level is $18. We can find our endpoints for our 3 income levels by saying, okay, 8 divided by 4 on both ends is going to give us consumption of 2 cups of coffee and 2 donuts. Our next income we have y1 equals 8, y2 equals 16, and y3 equals 24. Oops. I regret putting those so close to me. So at an income, that's our first budget constraint. Our next budget constraint is at an income of 16. We find our endpoints y divided by the price of our goods. It's going to give us 4 for L2, 4 donuts, 4 cups of coffee, and then 24 divided by 4 is going to give us 8 donuts and 8 cups of coffee. Right? So far, so good. If Hugo views these 2 goods as perfect complements, then we're going to see L-shaped indifference curves or right angle indifference curves because Hugo cannot be made better off by consuming 1 more cup of coffee unless it comes with 1 additional donut. And so another way to think of it is if we kind of pull a straight line from this budget constraint, there's no point on this indifference curve that would actually make Hugo as happy as this point. This point is Hugo's ideal point. So that means that Hugo's ideal consumption point with a budget of $8 and a price of $4 for donuts and $4 for coffee, he'll consume 1 of each. At a budget of $16 with $4 for each, we're going to see Hugo consume 2 cups of coffee and 2 donuts because $16 split evenly for those. Sorry, you guys can't see that. Price of coffee is $4. Price of donuts is $4. There we go. So that's going to mean that they consume 2 of each. Hugo consumes 2 of each. We get another right angle indifference curve. No matter how far out we go with this indifference curve, Hugo will never be made better off with another cup of coffee unless it comes with another donut. And then finally, at $24, Hugo can consume 8 donuts or 8 cups of coffee, but what Hugo wants to consume is, let's divide that $24 by 2 and we get $12 each. Then $12 divided by the $4 per cup of coffee gives us 3 cups of coffee for Hugo and 3 donuts. And that's our last indifference curve. And you can see again, no matter how far out I go, Hugo's never going to want another cup of coffee unless it comes with a donut, or another donut unless it comes with a cup of coffee. Now we get to the fun part and derive the angle curve. So remembering this stuff over here, I want to bring down another curve that has the quantity of donuts. You know what, the book tends to use lowercase q, which makes sense because we're looking at individual consumption donuts. Individual consumption points. And then over here we're going to have Hugo's income. So we'll have $8, $16, and $24. And I can get rid of this and make it look nice now. And then drop down these consumption points. 1, 2, 3. So $8. Hugo consumes 1 donut. At $16 income, Hugo consumes 2. And at $24, Hugo consumes 3 donuts. So as Hugo's income goes up, we see the angle curve for donuts slopes upward, and that even though they're perfect complements and Hugo wants to have them together and only in equal proportions, we can also see donuts are a normal good. And as Hugo's income goes up, he consumes more of them. The last part says, how much does his weekly budget have to rise for Hugo to buy 1 more donut per week? And this is sort of a conceptual question, but if we're talking about the sort of the ratio or the levels that we raise Hugo's income by, we want to remember that if we want Hugo to consume 1 more donut per week, we have to shift that budget constraint out evenly. So it has to rise by enough to buy a donut and a cup of coffee. So if we increased Hugo's income from $24 to $28, he couldn't buy 1 more of each. And so he wouldn't be better off. Does that make sense? So if we moved out if we increased Hugo's income from $24 right here to $28, and we divided that $28 by 2, and then divided the $14 by the price of a donut and the price of a cup of coffee, we'd get 3.5. And so we still would only have Hugo consuming 3 donuts and 3 cups of coffee. He wouldn't choose to consume 1 donut without also getting to consume a cup of coffee. So if we want to raise his income, we have to raise it by at least $8. And then we can increase his consumption. Does that make sense? Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Have a great day.